Welcome to the Grow podcast, where we are all growing together. We have two special guests here today, Anthony and Raylene. Thanks for coming today.
Yes, hello everyone.
You guys hold a special place in my heart because you have two of my teenagers in your care.
We love them.
So you are two special people to me.
Thank you. They are two special teenagers for what it's worth.
Very special students.
I love
Son
that.
is awesome. His voice is deeper than mine already.
Right.
And your daughter is, I think she
sweetest.
can
Oh my
read better than
goodness.
I can. Her articulation is crazy.
That's that homeschool life.
Yeah.
That's that homeschool life right there.
We love them.
Why don't you guys introduce yourselves
Yeah.
and tell us what you do here at church?
So Anthony and Raylene rolled on. We are married, and we oversee our youth ministry. We have been in the youth ministry for
10 years?
going on 10 years, something like that. Been involved in it. We've been overseeing the program for the past, I think, about 2.5 years now. You used to work with our young adult ministry.
Yes, I worked with them for about 6 years, but all the while I was still a youth leader. I've always loved the youth ministry space, and so, it's
You
been
guys
fun.
were like 5 when you started.
Right.
Yeah.
I did start right after high school, so yes.
Yeah, we are both. You had grown up in another church environment. I did not grow up in a church space, but we both started following Jesus in our youth program when we were around junior, senior year in high school, and then got involved volunteering after that. Got involved at the staff level shortly thereafter, and we've been here since.
Cool.
So, yeah.
I think it's awesome that you both came to Christ in your youth,
Yeah.
and then now you're ministering to youth. So you have a unique perspective on where they are, what can sort of grasp their attention. And so I'm wondering, we're in this prayer series at church, and so I'm wondering, when it comes to prayer, what's working with them? Like, how do you reach them? Because you have to compete with TikTok. You have to compete with, all the social media that is like, if you don't grab their attention right away, they're on to the next thing.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think prayer it's one of the most difficult skills for a young person to learn. And it's one of the most difficult things for them to kind of develop on a regular basis, because to what you just referred to, this is a very kind of, mentally stimulated generation. And it's already a difficult task to learn, how to concentrate, how to focus. But add to that the typical rhythm of a young person today, which is I'm either engaging with people, or when I'm not, I'm engaging on a device. And I don't mean to, vilify devices or anything like that. I just simply mean to say that when our mind is constantly switching from one task to another, it is, and then all of a sudden prayer is this thing where I'm supposed to sit down and I'm supposed to focus or whatever. It is, it's very difficult. It's very challenging. When it comes to what's working and what's resonating, do you want me to give it a shot? Do you want to, you want me to give it a shot?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think for young people who, come to the topic of prayer with so many kind of preconceived notions of what it should look like and what their experience should be in prayer, I think as much as we can, trying to give them trying to share stories and experiences that illustrate for them what prayer can be and what it can look like. And that means that it doesn't always have to look like you up super early with your Bible and, kind of going through the Lord's Prayer line by line and expounding on each word and stuff, because, for many of them, that's just a hard place to start. And it's a hard place to consistently feel
that's a hard place for adults to start.
Yes,
for real.
Yeah. So as much as we can, where, I know you've had conversations with students around like, hey, when you are in between classes and when you are in between activities throughout your day, those can be places where you do talk and connect with God. Because ultimately what we're after through prayer is a deepening of our relationship with God. So the practices and the methods that we employ to that end are to that end. And, when that can be the focus, I think sometimes it can help to take away some of the pressure and I don't know if I'm doing this right, and I don't sound like so-and-so, or I'm not having these special experiences or whatever. Those would be some of the things.
Yeah. So having, you grew up in church, and then having gotten saved during your young years, what has your journey with prayer been like?
Yeah, I feel like really early on in my walk with God, I think because I grew up in church and I knew kind of like the formal side to prayer and what it should and shouldn't look like, even though that's not correct. It just always felt like something legalistic to me. So early on in my walk with God, I knew something had to shift there. And I remember reading in Matthew 7 when Jesus is saying that there will be people who come to him and saying, like, we did all these great things in your name, but then Jesus said he will tell them, I never even knew you. That shook me. And I remember learning really on, like, there needs to be an intimacy if I'm going to do this. Like, if I'm going to walk with God, I want to know him. And there's obviously many different ways to grow in intimacy, but I have found that prayer was that place of closeness. And so since then, I do feel like there's kind of been this ongoing and might be a lifelong journey for me of just growing in intimacy when it comes to my prayer life. And so that's like what I think of off the bat when I think of my journey with prayer is, what does it look like in different seasons to grow in this intimacy with Jesus? And obviously in different seasons, it has looked different. Before kids, it looks different. Having more responsibility, it just is always going to be different. And that is something that we share with the students all the time, is that it's going to look different in different seasons. But for me, the aim and the target has always kind of been the same, which is, what does growing in intimacy look like?
Yeah. I think that's key that you said it's a lifelong journey. And as you grow, mature, your prayer life, your spiritual life, it grows and matures as well. And so you can't put these expectations of maybe what you see on social media or YouTube, you can't put that on your own life. And I think that's what happens to not just teenagers, everybody. You see like this perfectly curated spiritual life, you know, like I have my little quiet corner, and it's like, I don't even have a quiet corner at home. How am I going to have a quiet corner to pray? But I think they see this picture painted, and then when their life doesn't measure up, they're like, oh, well, just forget it. You know, it doesn't look like that. And it's like, it's not, our lives are, our spiritual, our regular lives are not cookie cutter. So your spiritual life can in no way be cookie cutter. And so I'm thinking about where you guys are. Like, you have a toddler, you have another baby on the way, you're in grad school. And so with all of those things, how do you navigate your own personal prayer lives with these? Because you mentioned, like, before kids, your prayer life probably looked a lot different.
Yes, very different.
And so now that you have a kid and another on the way, and you have all these increasing responsibilities, and the plate is getting fuller, and the margin for prayer and other spiritual disciplines may be getting smaller, like, how do you juggle all of that?
Raylene said that before kids, her prayer life was different. I would say it was easier. It was so much easier. I wouldn't use the word different. It was just easier. You know, I woke up after a good night's sleep,
Right?
and just communed with the Lord unbothered. But no, I think there's always going to be. I have realized that there's always going to be that tension between, I need to make time for God, and I need to respect the limits of my life and my season. The make time for God is, there's always going to be this side of, like, God is a priority in my life, and a relationship that, like any other relationship, it develops with time, and it develops with, communication. And therefore, I think in every season, trying to figure out, hey, what does it look like for me to ensure that I'm, putting myself in the presence of God, that I am studying, that I am, reading, that I'm praying, whatever those particular disciplines are going to look like, so that I can grow in that intimacy with Him, and so that is a priority. I think, I've heard several writers who have, made something to, they have made the point in some way, shape, or form that basically, like, if you don't have 15 minutes or whatever to spend time with God in a day, you might be busier than God wants you to be. Like, if you can't stop for a little bit, so spending time with Him and making the time for Him, I just know for me that it's always going to feel that way to some degree. But then at the exact same time, respecting whatever the limits of my life are, because, to your point, it's not just teenagers who see a vision of spirituality and go, like, man, I don't measure up. Like, I have spiritual heroes who are much older than I am and are in a different season of life than me. And sometimes when I hear about what they do for their devotional rhythms, and I hear stories of like, not just on a daily or a weekly rhythm, but, annually, like I will go away once a quarter and, I'll stay at a cabin over the weekend and I'll just commune and spend time with God. Like when I hear people talk about that, I get so amazed and so inspired, and I'm like, I want to do that too. And then I'm like, I can't afford that. I can't afford 4 weekends a year, with a
financially,
cabin.
time-wise.
Yes, and then leave my wife and the little kid, or what will eventually be the little kids. And it's like, hey, see ya. I'm gonna go, go be with God.
Right.
And there's just always going to be that tension. So I think leaning into that tension of, okay, what do the natural limits of my life look like in this season? And then at the same time, what do I personally feel like the Spirit of God is inviting me into when it comes to communion with Him? Because most of the time, at least this is just my experience, I kind of feel like my spirit, my conscience is a guide for me in terms of, am I spending enough time with Him? Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to get legalistic about it, but it's more a matter of like, hey, in certain seasons, I feel like God might really be inviting me into more stillness and more silence. In other seasons, edification might be the goal, and I'm praying in tongues a lot. Or I've experimented with like different daily offices throughout the day and stuff, and all with that kind of intention of like, okay, what does it look like right now to go, all right, God, I'm here, I'm yours, I'm surrendered, I'm paying attention, and I'm doing that in a way that sustains, not just, checking a box off that I did my devotions, but I'm trying to do it in a way that sustains my, intimacy and connection to Him throughout the day. Mm-hmm. So I talked a lot. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
In addition to really quickly him saying like the rhythm of prayer changing, I feel like also the substance of prayer has changed, especially since becoming a parent. I mean, we've only been parents for 2 years now, and I feel like I have never prayed more desperate prayers in my life. Yes. And I just know that's a lifelong journey of a parent all the way into adulthood, as our parents have told us. And even with the added responsibility of now overseeing a youth ministry, like there's more of like a desperation and trust, like total trust in our prayers. It's like before having kids and before added responsibility and stuff, we know God's in control. We know that He carries everything. But then after, when you're in it, you're like, oh my goodness, like God, we need you. Yeah. We like really need you. And so I feel like the substance has kind of, it has more depth and there's more like complete trust. There's this desperation of like, God, we need you. And it has only been in that place of prayer where I feel like we have gotten the peace and the grace that we need to be parents, to be ministry leaders, to lead a team. And so prayer has become way more desperate.
Yeah. And let me tell you, the desperation never leaves.
Yes. As they get older,
whether you have a 2-year-old or a 21-year-old. Yeah, you're just praying for different things.
Right now we're praying for his safety because he is 2 years old and just crazy.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure as they get older, it becomes more about friends.
Yeah. Well, you still pray about their safety because they have to go out and navigate the world on their own. And you just like, okay, I hope that I taught you everything you needed to know, but like prayer is a lifelong journey. Yeah. Parenting and praying for them is it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. I remember being, I think it was baby number 3. And I remember nursing in the middle of the night, and that was like the only quiet time. And so it would be nights of desperate prayer. Yeah. Like, okay, this is the only time I have. And I'm just going to be nursing and, praying to God. So it's like you have to just find what works for you, basically.
I made like a kind of a commitment. That is a strong word, but when our son was born, and I was, I realized, hey, I'm feeding him, like bottle feeding him at different times. And I kind of told myself, I'm just going to set that up as a daily office. Every time I feed him, I'm going to pray and I'm going to connect with God. And it sounded so good to me, like I was going to grow with God.
Right.
And Tracy, that probably happened like 2 times. Right. And every other time the prayer was just go to sleep so that I can go to sleep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. If you have a newborn, we'll say a prayer for you.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. It's a whole other world out there. Yeah. I think going from 1 to 2 is hard, but then after that, you guys can keep adding and it'll just be easy.
Yeah.
So as youth leaders down through the years, what have you learned about prayer for the kids that you're serving? Because I know as my kids have gotten older, I've sort of marveled at their prayer, like what they're praying for, what's on their heart, like the salvation of other people. And they're just, they're praying big things that you're like, oh, that's on your heart, you know? Yeah. And so what have you learned as youth leaders about what's on kids' hearts for prayer, or what prayer means to them?
Yeah. I mean, I think I know for me, when it comes to praying for students, praying with students, it's a two-way street in terms of what is learned, right? Because I feel like when I pray for students or pray with students, it's just one of the things that grows my heart for them, like the most, like in terms of just being with God and spending time with Him on behalf of students. I notice how it changes me. And then when it comes to being with students and hearing their prayers and hearing what they're praying about, it really is a window into what they think about God and what they think about their relationship to God and their kind of place in the world. And yeah, the things that they do hope for, I mean, it's going to be so contextual to every student and to their season of life. The things as a general rule that a 7th grader prays about is going to be different than what a 12th grader prays about. But a lot of times I think when we or our leaders are lucky enough to really develop the relational equity with students over years to earn their trust and to be led into that space that you're alluding to as a parent, where you get to see their heart and you get to see the, unfiltered, here's what I'm really hoping for, here's what I'm asking for. It does give you a window into just what God can do in a person's life. And, I think hopefully it would be an encouragement for parents. A lot of times I think that the prayers in working with students and talking to them about their prayers and praying with them, it is an encouragement to know, like, oh, God really is doing something in their heart. I mean, a lot of times maybe behavior-wise, you don't always see it, or belief-wise, they're not always able to articulate it. But prayer is one of those things, like, it reveals their heart. It reveals what really matters to them. And, for some students, even trying to, we almost have to call that out of them, where it's like, okay, we prayed for you. We prayed for what you wanted. Now let's pray for your family. Mm-hmm. And then you get to see, oh, wow, they really do care about that aunt who, is in the hospital right now or whatever it was. But sometimes that just doesn't always come to the forefront because there isn't the trust in the relationship, or for them, it's like, I don't really know what would come of that if I do bring it up. But I think prayer is a window into their heart and into what really, really matters to them. So.
Yeah. So you guys did a sort of neat little project with youth. It was, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Was it like a sort of prayer wall, but not?
Yes, they had the option to write down their prayers and submit them to us and our team. Mm-hmm. And that was really cool to see. So kind of to his point, like getting a window into what are the things that they're hoping for. Some of them were really like serious and heavy. Others, just the range, like was for like a friend's friend, or like the things that they care about. Like you can see, okay, God, like you are doing something in their heart, whether it's something so personal to them or it was somebody maybe that was like distant in their life. Like that's who they thought of in that moment, and that's what they thought of. And so that was a really cool thing to see. And it was optional, but so many of them did it. Mm-hmm. It was really encouraging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would be encouraging for parents to hear that, because like you said, sometimes the behavior, you're like, oh, this is a lost cause. You may not know the depths of what they're thinking or praying about, but it's encouraging as the youth leaders to hear, like, yeah, they're concerned about a lot of things, and they may not always be able to articulate it, or maybe even feel vulnerable enough to share. But I love that you created a space for them to do that, and that they took advantage of that. So I love hearing that.
No, I mean, notice that when we're talking about them and their prayers, we say things we say things like, oh, it's cool to see that God's doing something, because we see the same things that parents see, in that the teenage phase is difficult. And in the teenage phase, there's a lot of communication that gets shut down. There's a lot of, changes to the nature of the relationship, to the behavior in the young person. And sometimes, as adults, we are looking at things with kind of our markers of success, if you will, where it's like, man, they're still not doing that, or I don't know if they've understood that lesson yet. And I think that as it pertains to a young person's formation into the image of Jesus and their formation into someone who lives and loves others like Jesus. And then from that place grows in maturity and responsibility and all those things. It is a process. And sometimes the wins, one of the things that we'll talk to our team about is like, hey, with young people, you got to be able to identify the wins, because sometimes the wins are going to show up in ways that we wouldn't think of as that's a win. But, you know, when they told you, hey, I actually ended that relationship with so-and-so. And for us, we might think, oh, that was the most obvious, logical, best thing you could have done. Like, they were horrible for you. But for them, it was a decision that said, hey, I really want this, God, but I'm going to trust you instead. That's a huge win. And being able to recognize those decisions and those things that they do, being able to recognize God's work in their heart through things like that is, I mean, it's one of the things that we try to, you know, we're trying to get better at, to just recognize and then, you know, celebrate along the way. But yeah.
You know, sometimes as a parent especially, we forget that teenagers are still in the developmental stage. Like literally our brains are still growing.
Yeah.
Their body, they may have deep voices and they may be tall, but like they're still growing.
Yeah.
And so we have to sort of take that into account, like things that we think are obvious, or, you know, you should be praying about this, or you should be doing this. It's like, well, no, they're just kids still trying to grow up.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we have to give them a little bit of grace to have room to grow, because we were there once too. So it's like we forget that we were on that side, and we have to watch them make mistakes and progress as well. Yeah. So for the parents out there who are bringing their kids to you guys, what do you wish that they knew about their kids?
Yes.
Because I think you guys might get a window into their kids that, you know, parents don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, well, first, we always like to say we are not experts in parenting teenagers, because we do not have a teenager.
Thankfully, no.
Yes, not yet. We have a couple more years. But we do, like you said, get a window, and doing it for about 10 years now, we see patterns. And one of our favorite things is learning from other parents in our community of teenagers. So watching them do it in real time. And I was actually talking to a mom this weekend, and she has a son who is older. He's an older high school student, and she was telling me just about some things that he's going through. He has to make some really big, difficult decisions, and it was just really encouraging to hear how her and her husband are walking him through it, how they are really encouraging him to kind of lead his own prayer life and seek God for himself when it comes to making these big decisions. And she was saying one of the biggest ways that they do that is through asking him questions that challenge him, that bring him to this place of, oh, I do need to go talk to God about that. And they are almost playing this like coach role where they're not in the game with him because he's growing up, he's becoming a man, but they are on the side still, and they're coaching him through asking him questions. But ultimately, their heart is that he would develop his own prayer life, and that they would be there for support, but that he would be the one seeking God. And so I do feel like when it comes to something that that we would hope more parents catch on to, is that heart of like, your teenagers are going to be adults very soon.
Yeah.
And something as in their spiritual life as important as prayer, you have a really cool and unique opportunity, like this mom that I was speaking to really set them up to win when it comes to making big decisions and seeking God for wisdom and guidance. And so it's always really encouraging to learn how different parents of teenagers are doing it at home and discipling their students, because we get to then now share that experience with other parents, because it was really, really cool to hear, and I think really helpful to learn what they're doing and how they're doing it, and seeing how he's learning to pray for himself and to look for God's voice.
Yeah. I would just say, you know, to Raylene's point, we just get to see and just kind of watch what parents do, and you know, see the different. Obviously, every family setup is so different. Every individual student is so different, but we do get to notice the trends, and we do get to notice, what did that seem to produce? What did this seem to produce, or whatever? And I think, especially as students get older, and I don't have a time frame for this age or whatever, because every student is so individual, but as students do get older, just kind of that posture and that switch. I think Joel's used this analogy from the stage, is when he was parenting his kids, particularly he talks about it with his son. There came a point in his son's life, and I think it was around the middle school, kind of early high school phase, where Joel used the analogy of, I could no longer parent him across the table. I needed to start parenting him by sitting next to him on a couch and watching a game. And the posture, it was like the posture was illustrating that anyone with a 14, 15, 16-year-old, they experience it, where all of a sudden, when you try to have I'm going to download information to you, it's like, you're not hearing a thing I'm saying. Right. Or maybe if they're good, it seems like they're hearing you, and then they go do the same thing over and over again. And there's something that we've noticed, that kind of shifts with students somewhere in adolescence, where parents have just had a lot of success when they kind of change that posture and that approach and goes, all right, now I'm side by side with you in this. And to your point, I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to just wonder with you, and I'm going to push you to prayer and to God and ask what your experience is like with him there. Because, one of the prayer requests that we got a couple times in that little prayer project thing that we did was young people who were saying, I want a better relationship with my parent. And I know young people, they never will tell their parent that. Like, it's, they're not actually going to say, hey, Mom, Dad, I really want to talk to you more, and I want you to understand me better, or whatever. Especially as a generality, especially if they're a boy, they don't have the ability to articulate themselves like that. We joke about the difference between girl small groups and guy small groups.
Very different.
Different podcast for a different day. But, we know that parents aren't always you're not going to hear from them everything that they're thinking and that they want and that they feel. But they do watch everything you do, and they do listen, and they do still learn. And one of the ways that we've seen parents have a lot of success with students as they get older is kind of by, just adjusting the posture and becoming that kind of sideline coach where I'm in this with you, up to a point, because I'm not actually in the game. The game is your life, and that's your life. But as much as we can be there to, support, encourage, consider with them, and wonder with them, we've seen it do a lot of good.
Yeah, I know as a parent, that's one of the challenges, is that moving to that coaching role that you were mentioning, where like when they're young, you're like, you dress them for the game. You're carrying them and the ball. Like, you're so involved, and then you have to gradually like move yourself to the sidelines, which I think is a big challenge. Maybe for the kids too. I'm not sure, because they don't always vocalize that. But what are some of the challenges that you're seeing for kids who are trying to grow in their prayer life and just their spiritual lives overall?
Students are busy.
Yeah, I was gonna say the busy, that comes up a lot. And it surprises me every time, even though we hear it all the time, because as an adult who is busy, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm like, you're not busy.
Like, you're busy. I feel busy. But yeah, that comes up a lot. It actually has been coming up a lot recently with my group in particular. And it's just sports, social life, family life. And they just feel like, especially when it comes to reading the Bible, at least with prayer, we've kind of gotten it down where it's like, talk to God on the go. Like, let's keep that, like, let's start doing that. But when it comes to the discipline of reading, we have learned, like, that's the number one. It's like, I am so busy. I don't know how I'm going to have time. And so, yeah, busyness. And then, like we had mentioned earlier in our conversation, distraction. But I feel like busyness seems to be at the top.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't mean to, I'm not going to try to do a Bible study right here, but I really do think that because we've thought about hey, what are the things that make it hard for young people to grow? What are the things that challenge them or stop them from growing in their faith? Because obviously those are the things that we're trying to come up against. And I think that Jesus's whole model for why some seed grows and some seed doesn't grow is, you have hey, sometimes the farmer throws a seed and the enemy comes and just takes it away. And I do think for some young people, I'm not saying this is everything, but I do think for some of them, they don't have the environment or the ecosystem that is, conducive. And probably that's not going to be the young people who are represented by people who are watching this podcast, but we are a very diverse church and we get a lot of, people who come and it's like, oh, maybe I show up, on Easter and on Christmas or whatever it is. But other than that, there's not a lot of family rhythms. There's not a lot of, positive influences in that individual's life. And I just say that as a description. I don't mean anything by it. But for some young people, it's the environment, the ecosystem is going to be challenging. For others, that whole idea of like, hey, they get excited, the seed grows, but there's no root. And sometimes, quite frankly, challenges and tragedy and difficulties and unanswered prayer, it can really take faith out of a young person's experience when we tell them things like, hey, God is always there. And then, our community is big enough to where we have seen students who have to deal with some things way too young and way too early in life, and experiences of losing people or things that happen to them that are just tragic. And then to, what's probably most common in terms of the most typical profile of the young person that we see in our demographic would be that third category of the seed is sown, but the thorns grow up with it. And they just, the thorns are identified as the cares and the desires of this world. And they just choke the seed that, young people are so busy that they don't have time to develop rhythms of intimacy with God, or they're just so enamored by other things. You said it a moment ago, like their brain isn't fully developed. They don't have impulse control, right? So even though we may look at certain things and go, those friends aren't good for you, that relationship isn't good for you, those habits are not good for you, they're not going to be good for you long term, it can be really difficult to see that in the moment when all you see is kind of the bait on the hook. And we're competing, quite frankly, against all of those things. And I say all of that in an attempt to be helpful, to go, hey, for each student, it's going to be different. And for each student, that is the opportunity of parents. That is what we try to endeavor to do alongside our leaders, is to help young people identify what are the things that either are blocking you from growing, or what are the things that you tend to chase instead of pursuing Jesus and his will and his way. Because if we can figure that out, it's that whole idea, just remove the obstacle and then you'll grow. And that's the process.
Yeah. Yeah, that busyness thing I think parents think like I'm helping my kids because I'm putting them in this activity and this activity, but it's like you have to, just like we have to find a balance, they have to be able to find a balance too. A couple of weeks ago, so you guys have the reading guide, and my son was saying, oh yeah, I got off track, and then he's trying to keep up with the reading plan in the Bible, and he lost his streak, and he was so discouraged. And I was like, why are you discouraged? Like nobody's grading you, nobody's telling you have to check this stuff off. Like, why are you putting this pressure on yourself? And so, he's like, well, it's the reading, listen, and I'm like, chill out. Like, you can listen to the Bible. While you're going to sleep or in the car. Like, you don't have to pull out your Bible and make this big production. So just trying to find ways to show him, like, you can show yourself grace. And nobody's putting all this pressure on you. But I think that's like that's something real for these kids these days. They want to get it right. And it's like there's no right.
I have had multiple conversations that kind of go like, if I cannot do it the right way, then sometimes I feel like, why then do it at all? And so a lot of our conversations are helping them to get creative and think like, God is bigger than that. Like you said, you can read on the Bible app on your way to school, between practice and home, like helping them see that it doesn't need to look a certain way. And doing something to commune with God is going to have more of a positive impact than just saying like, oh, if I can't get the 30 minutes in, then I'm not going to do it. And so we have to think very creatively.
Absolutely. Yeah. So growing up, do you feel like the challenges that you guys had with your walk, your spiritual walk, are similar to the ones that youth are facing today?
Do you want to go?
Yeah,
I didn't have any challenges with my spiritual walk.
I would say he didn't have one.
It wasn't anything.
Yes, he didn't have one. Yeah, I think I relate heavily with that third category with the thorns, and thankfully I don't think I ever struggled with busyness, or I was just not that type of student and person, or with distraction, because social media was very different for us growing up. We had it, but it was just very different than what it is now. But definitely with the world and the desires and wants that I had were way more appealing than walking with God. And so from 7th to 11th grade, I was just following everything I wanted, because growing up in church, I knew, like, okay, I know what this is. Like, I've seen enough, God. Like, you're not fun. I want to do the fun things.
Yeah.
And so I went off the rails, as I like to say, and I just started to chase everything that I wanted, every desire I had. And so it was a pretty dark 4 years of my life, but
that's when you met me.
Yeah, that is when I met you.
During the dark.
Yes. Well, 1 year of our
That's
relationship
crazy.
was really bad. And and then we started following Jesus.
Thank God for the light.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so now, like you had even mentioned, it is really cool getting to use my experience in those 4 years to speak to students. Like, no, I know that looks fun. Like, I've been there. I've done the things. I partied. I did all the things that look fun to a 13, 14, 15-year-old. And it just still never satisfied. And so I'm grateful for that experience, but I definitely relate to those students who are trying to follow Jesus, but also are dealing with the just appeal that everything else has and fighting those desires.
Yeah. I think it's a hard go for especially high schoolers who want to live for God, because you're going to be different.
Yes.
And I remember I didn't get saved until I was like in college, but I remember the kids who were in high school who were trying to follow God, and it was like, what is their problem?
Yes. So
they're weird.
We started following God at the same time, and it was our senior year of high school. And so we did have 1 year of like, oh my goodness, this is very difficult. And so it is cool getting to relate to those students as well, because we're able to encourage them with our experience.
The weird kids.
Yeah, we did. And it was funny because we used to be the party kids.
You switch sides.
And I think your point is it's really, really relevant, because for Jonathan Haidt talks about this in his book on the anxious generation. Like, social media has so impacted young people and young culture that it's actually not at least from his kind of argument, because he's arguing for like legislative change and, you know, social change and stuff like that. And he basically just makes the point, like, it's not even enough now to just, as a parent, say, oh, well, my kids aren't going to have it, and therefore my kids aren't going to be affected by it. Because it is such a staple in culture now. If your kids don't have it, they are affected by it.
Yep.
Because they actually are no longer able to connect with the other kids that they would have been able to connect with if they were on it, if they understood the language, if they understood, you know, all of the stuff that's happening there. So when it comes to young people and the challenges, you know, of today, I think social media and the ripple effects there are still being felt by everyone, and everyone is still trying to make sense of them, because, you know, you can say, okay, well, I'm just going to take my family, and this is not going to be true for them. And this is not going to, you know, we're not going to engage with that, which has wisdom behind it, but it also brings its own set of challenges. And we've navigated that with students where, you know, a young person is doing their best to follow God, and it's like, hey, I actually don't think anyone around me or in my age bracket, I don't connect with them.
Yeah.
Because the value system is so different. Yes. And that's such a difficult place to be.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to empathize with young people who, you know, especially in a middle school, early high school phase. I think it was easier for us because we were older and because we were dating at the time. But you are wired in that phase of your life for relationship to others.
Yeah.
You're trying to find belonging so much. And if you feel like there's no one who really gets me or who I can really, you know, be myself with and follow Jesus and be faithful to him, that just adds to the temptation to compromise and to say, okay, I'll kind of put that, you know, to the side just so that I can meet what is essentially a core psychological need. It's difficult. It is challenging for sure.
Yeah. Now, with all that is wrong with this generation. There's a lot that's right with this generation. And I know you've seen it. You've seen the kids who are thriving and who really do want to live for God. So what inspires you about this generation? Because you really do have a front row on what's going to be the next generation of the church.
Yeah. I think in particular, thinking of the students that want to follow Jesus and or even like are trying, I think the desire is what inspires me. Like they want it. I so often think of the father in, I believe it's Matthew 9, who is telling Jesus, like, help my unbelief, like to heal my son. Like, I feel like sometimes when I'm talking to students, they're asking me, like, can you please help my unbelief? Like, can you help? Like, there's so much that I want to believe about God that is true. Like, help me to see it. And then I encourage them, ask God. God wants to help your unbelief. And I think that inspires me so much, and it gives me so much excitement for these students because they're like 14, 15 years old, like earnestly desiring to see God move in their life, to see God move in their families and in their school. And so being able to create a space where we can help them learn more about that desire, to grow it, to foster it, it's really cool to think like, man, like, God, you really have something special in these students' hearts. And that has just been so encouraging as leaders, and just seeing that they really want to believe that God is who he says he is. And they really want it, even if things in their life feel like, oh, maybe this isn't, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. This isn't what feels like what God is doing, but I'm still going to believe, and I'm still going to try to see what God is doing. And so that has been really encouraging.
Yeah, and I would just add really quickly that they, not only do they have access, to all of the bad things out there and to all the negative influences, but they also have access to all of the really cool, impressive things that people are doing or that the people of God are doing. And I think that young people, like, their imagination and their kind of, what they think is possible is a lot of times going to be greater than people who have tried it, seen failure, or, I'm a process person. Like, I'm like, trust the process, one foot after another, day after day, just show up and trust how God moves through that. And I do think that's legitimate, but I also think there is something to, God just does things sometimes. And sometimes young people have the faith and the imagination to wonder, what if God just did that thing? And what if there wasn't all this like character formation involved? And what if there wasn't, all these other things that I think it's easier for us as we get older to, recognize that things take time and life takes time and it's complicated, all those things. Like, sometimes young people, they just have the imagination, the creativity, and the audacity to hope and to go, man, what if God just did, something super, super awesome in whatever the category or context. It is inspiring.
Yeah. I agree with that. I hear that sometimes even from my own kids, and I'm like, yeah, just you wait. It's like, oh gosh, so faithless.
It definitely challenges us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, you guys have been a joy, and you're doing something right over there in youth, because my kids don't play about Sunday morning and they do not play about Wednesday.
Thank you.
They are going to get there. So I appreciate everything that you guys are doing with the youth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we'll have to have you back, because I had some more questions for you. But they will be here all day. So
we look forward to being back. We love the podcast family. We love you, and we love your kids and everyone else's kids.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm glad we got you before the baby came, because who knows when we'll see you.
I know things are about to
comes.
get really busy. But it'll be good.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.